I think this really highlights one of the biggest mistakes that we make around sex, which is to see it as something purely physical and biological. And we're always looking for physical solutions to something. And I see that most people find it easier to have sex than to talk about it, even with the person they have sex with.
She's in a long-term relationship, zero desire for her husband, absolutely none. Yet she is having incredibly sexy dreams, often involving either Hollywood stars or her exes, she said. But when she wakes up, she has zero desire for her husband.
I'm having these sexy dreams. I'm even having orgasms in my sleep, or I'm having all of these fantasies. But then when it comes to my partner, I'm just not interested. Relationships don't happen by accident. They really do take effort and intention and knowing exactly what to do. We hear happily ever after, but we never hear what it actually takes to create happily ever after. Like, it doesn't matter how much you love your car or how great your car is. If you don't keep taking care of it, if you don't put fuel into it, if you don't check it out when a warning light comes on, if you don't take it to a professional every now and then to get it checked out, your car is not going to keep running well. And I think we can think of our relationships in the same way.
Isiah McKimmie is one of Australia's most sought-after couples therapists and sexologists. She is master's qualified, Gottman trained, the person that other therapists go to when they want a second opinion. You may have seen Isiah on The Morning Show because she is their go-to relationship therapist, but Isiah is somebody who I met as a journalist and have continued to be friends with over the last decade easily. She didn't start out as a sexpert. She actually started out as a shy country girl whose parents didn't even talk about sex. Today, we are talking about what happens to your body during perimenopause and menopause and how that can change your relationship. What happens when your body starts changing the rules, when you have maybe pain that wasn't there before, desire that disappears except maybe in your dreams, and the very awkward truth of showing up for your own sensuality and how that might become difficult at this time of life for a whole range of reasons. Let's get to the podcast.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm so glad that you're here because together we're going to work through big stuff.
Isiah, hi, and welcome to Big Stuff.
Thank you, Danielle. It's always so great to be having conversations with you. I always look forward to working with you on whatever it is.
I can't believe this is the first time I've had you on Big Stuff. That's just nuts.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nuts. I know that I've thought about you ever since I started, but for some reason it's only come about now. But it is perfect timing.
Love it.
Because this is a conversation that I've been having with my friends, with my peers, and with my clients around, what is going on with our sensual and sexual selves during this life transformation.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Super relevant. Very topical right now. I love it.
Yes. So let's just dive straight in. Talk to us about the changes that are happening during perimenopause and menopause and how they might be impacting our sex lives.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a lot that happens. I think anyone going through this kind of knows the ways that it impacts us physically, emotionally. It impacts our identity. It impacts the way we're, engaging with the world, the way that we think. So what we see is that it impacts relationships, in a few ways. We have less of a buffer for what we used to. Hormones are changing. We're not always wanting to be as accommodating as we used to be. We're irritable. We're having hot flushes. We might not be sleeping very well, and that is going to impact how we're engaging with someone. We're also going to be experiencing physical changes, atrophy, so less lubrication, thinning of the skin. We might experience more pain during sex. We might not like being touched in the same ways. We might find that sensation and our ability to climax changes. That's going to impact our desire and our willingness to engage with a partner. So when we wrap all of these things up together, that's a lot of changes that we end up experiencing. But, and this is a hill that I will die on, is that I don't think that menopause is to blame for all of the issues that we see then in relationships, like more, increased tension and arguments and changes in sexual desire. What I see in the couples that I work with is that there have been things that have been under the surface for years and sometimes even decades. And women, because this is what we do, have had the capacity to be okay with it, to set it aside, to not say anything, to make everything, good. All of, those hormones that have us want to repair relationships. We've done all of those things. And then we get to this stage of life where we're done. And so we think it's menopause, but actually it's things that have been there for a really long time that finally I think we're just like, I'm done. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And that's what starts to create the challenges.
That's super interesting. It's super interesting that you say that, and it makes sense, and I feel it. I have had a lot of conversations, another one even just today with Michelle Olathe, a sleep expert psychologist, and talking about, the buffer, how the buffer shifts and how our capacity for the masking and stuff really sort of slips away at this time of life.
Yeah.
I had 3 people really reach out to me with 3 separate issues that really relate to what you just talked about. One of them is a physical issue, and the other 2 are sort of more emotional, mental issues. So let's start with the physical. This person talked about having pain in her perineum.
Yeah.
But I imagine that you see lots of different pain. So whether it's like pain around the entrance, whether it's burning, whether it's stabbing, whether it's different things, there's like there's thinning of your vaginal wall, but there's also shortening of your vaginal canal. Like all of these different things can happen. Plus also, a change in lubrication, so everything can just feel a little bit gritty and whatever.
Yeah.
This person said that the pain that she's experiencing isn't something that she's finding really easy to communicate about. They tried just using lubrication, but, it kind of makes it easier, but not necessarily
better.
Like great. Yeah. It's better as in like it doesn't hurt as much, but it's not necessarily, back to va-va-va-vom or whatever. So she's finding that rather than having, getting to the bottom of it, it's just kind of turning into this elephant in the room, and it's sort of elongating the time between intimacy, and it's sort of becoming this thing. What would you say to that?
I think this really highlights one of the biggest mistakes that we make around sex, which is to see it as something purely physical and biological. And we're always looking for physical solutions to something. And I see this a lot in terms of people wanting to enhance desire, at all different life stages is, they'll say, isn't there just a pill you can give me? Like, can't we just fix this biologically? But often there is so much more that is going on here. So firstly, for any pain, I am going to refer someone to a gynecologist so that we can really find out what's going on and they can get all of the biological supports. But as a colleague once said to me, well, I can't help them if they still don't want to have sex with their husbands. And I think that this then highlights a whole lot of other things. We can often fix biology or address biology, but it doesn't change a whole lot of things. And with this particular woman, one of the things I'm hearing from you is that it's a struggle to communicate with her partner. And that, I think, would indicate to me that there's a whole lot of other things that we want to check out here. Has she been having sex that she actually enjoyed the rest of the time, or has she struggled to communicate what she likes? If she can't let her partner know about the pain, or doesn't feel understood by her partner when she's tried to explain it, it's going to make it really hard for them to work together and make the kind of the changes and accommodations that we often need as we age to continue to enjoy sex. So we know that couples can continue to enjoy sex well into their 80s, but what that looks like, how we go about that, might have to change based on a whole lot of things. And really one of the important things is that couples can communicate about it. That's one of the most important factors for great sex at any age, and that they can work together on solutions. So my first recommendation to that person would be go and see your gynecologist, talk about the pain. Let's find out exactly what it is and look to see if there's anything that we can do physically. And then we would step in as couples therapists or sexologists to help two people start to have that conversation together.
Communication is such a huge part of any relationship. Why do you think communication changes at this time of life?
One of the things that I see in my work is that communication is a challenge in so many different relationships. It is one of the most common challenges that I see in therapy, regardless of whether people are presenting for lack of desire, misunderstanding, arguments, growing apart, infidelity. There's often communication missing at the center of that. And particularly in regards to sex, we're not taught how to talk about it. Most people find it easier to have sex than to talk about it. Even with the person they have sex with, there's often so much shame and fear around that. And then particularly as our bodies change, there can be that increased shame around it, feeling like we're different. So what was already hard, but you could maybe kind of get through and get by without talking about it, then suddenly becomes more difficult, and it's not as easy to navigate without the communication there.
Wild to think that, you find it less shameful to give someone a blowjob than it is to talk about it.
To talk about it, yeah, and to say, here's what I actually like.
Yeah. It's so wild to think about the vulnerability of sex and all the crazy shit we get up to. And then the idea of being able to talk about it, talk about what we like or what we need as our needs change, is crazy. Let's talk about also then the waning libido. I had somebody else who wrote into me saying she has zero, she's in a long-term relationship, zero desire for her husband, absolutely none. Yet she is having incredibly sexy dreams, often involving either Hollywood stars or her exes, she said. But when she wakes up, she has zero desire for her husband. It's not like that. She has this knock-on effect where she can then transfer the horn. What do you say to that? Like, there's clearly like a level of desire or libido there under the surface is just not being harnessed by her husband or by them as a couple.
Yeah, this is also not uncommon. I hear this a lot again at various stages of life. I've heard women say this, like, I'm having these sexy dreams. I'm even having orgasms in my sleep, or I'm having all of these fantasies. But then when it comes to my partner, I'm just not interested. So I would be really, really curious about the relationship, how connected they feel, what's missing, what her attachment style is and what her relationship is to love and intimacy together, how they share the mental load, and also, again, what sex has been like between them historically, whether she feels like she's really been getting her needs met and feels valued and respected, and is really, really getting the pleasure that she wants in that area. For me, whenever we're looking at sexual challenges, we're always wanting to look at the relationship holistically, because of course sex and our desire is going to be impacted by this. So I started out just in my work, just wanting to work with people around sex and teach them, really like what was like really fun and exciting things for me at the beginning, like, different positions, like you could, do some BDSM, some Tantra. I was like, oh, this is really going to
from chandeliers.
Who doesn't want to know this is going to change people's lives? And then very quickly, I realized, I was like, oh, I'm really going to have to go and really study relationships if I want to help people have great sex lives. That is the factor that is really the foundation for so many people, especially long-term couples. So when I'm working now and when I'm training my team, I'm always telling them we need to look at holistically at what's going on. We need to make sure you have a good connection. We need to make sure you're communicating well, and then we can take practical steps around sex. And there might be things that this woman can do with her partner. We talk about sexual breaks and sexual accelerators when we want to increase desire. And so there might be certain breaks that are going on that are inhibiting sexual desire in her relationship. We want to look at those. We want to get those out of the way. And then we would want to look at, okay, well, what is going to increase desire? As women, we often expect desire to be there first as our signal to engage with someone sexually. But it doesn't always work that way, because our desire is responsive and it responds to a whole lot of things going on around us. And it can also respond to us starting to engage with a partner by hugging them, by kissing them, by having touch that's really, enjoyable, and then seeing where that goes. So there might be a whole lot of things her and her partner can do that actually helps to cultivate that desire.
I'd like to talk a little bit more actually about the breaks and the accelerators. This is covered really well in the Emily Nagoski book, Come As You Are.
Mm-hmm.
But let's break that down a bit more. What do you mean by breaks and accelerators, and how does it work in an average woman? Person, anyone, getting it on.
Yeah. So this is the dual control model of sexual desire, which basically says there are things that inhibit desire and there are things that turn us on. And a way that we can think about this as our desire being like a car, sex drive, if you like. And there are going to be sexual breaks, things that stop us feeling desire, and sexual accelerators things that, make us feel in the mood and turn us on. One of the really crucial points to this is knowing that just like a car, when the brakes are on, the accelerators don't really work. And so for so many women particularly, because often we have more sensitive brakes and we have more brakes, and our desire is more responsive than men who can have a more spontaneous desire. So often for women, we will have brakes that are on. It might be tired, frustration in the relationship, being exhausted, being touched out, feeling like our body has changed, not feeling like we can speak up and ask for what we want during sex, or even just things like worry that the kids will hear us. All of those things are breaks. And with all of those breaks on, often what people will have done is tried different accelerators, a massage, date night, some lingerie, a sex toy, and they're like, nothing works to increase my desire. And it's really that none of those accelerators have worked because the brakes are still on.
So essentially trying to drive with the brake and the accelerator at the same time.
Exactly. So if we want to increase desire, we need to remove the brakes or reduce the brakes first and then start to add in the accelerators. And so many women that I speak to aren't even sure what their accelerators are. One, because they've had the brakes on for too long, but two, they've never actually really thought about what feels good for them around sex.
How would you suggest somebody begins to discover that? I mean, is that like a self-exploration thing, or I feel Like if you've gotten to certainly this age or a grown up age and you haven't actually even explored that, then you're coming from way behind the eight ball as these changes are happening in your life anyway. Like I imagine a lot of people would just like give sex up completely.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what happens. And it reinforces the narrative that we're often told that, oh, sex will just end for women at a certain age, or you get to a certain point and your desire is just done. And that just isn't the way that it necessarily works. But again, we haven't been given the tools and the skills to make sure that it lasts. So yeah, we certainly can explore by ourselves. We can, buy a toy, we can masturbate, we can self-pleasure, and we can work out what we like. And we can also do this with a partner. And and that is actually my preferred way of working with women. I know that not everyone wants to work that way, and some women want to go off, and explore by themselves first. And I have a member of my team now who is really, really great at helping women do that. I love working with couples and giving them tools and really fun games and little exercises that help them figure this out together. Where are like the secret spots that they like to be touched by each other? What is that thing that they really like that they have been too afraid to tell each other? Because for me, that doesn't just enhance pleasure, it also increases intimacy and strengthens the relationship. And I've worked with a lot of couples in their 50s and 60s who, after working with me, really say that they're having the best sex of their lives because of what they've learned. So that is possible. I think the first thing is really that mindset of seeing this as something really important and like anything, saying like, you know what, I really want to learn more about how this can be the very best it can be.
It is interesting because we do often hear that, in long-term relationships, and certainly as we age, it just becomes, it's not as important. I remember my mum saying, because I've always been a really sexual person, and my mum saying, make sure that you marry somebody who is your friend because you're not going to have sex for your whole life. And I was like, that'll never happen to me. Like, that's crazy. But I can definitely see that, like with my own libido, it has slowed down and definitely become more responsive than spontaneous.
Yes. Yeah.
There is a part of me that is really sad about that. I feel like there is a grief attached to that, like wild, raunchy, sensual self who I'm sure is still there, but he's just really freaking tired, Isiah. Like, life is really tiring. Teenagers are very unsexy. Our life day to day is very unsexy, and it's really easy to just get into this sort of rut and routine with your partner where you're just like, you're in the trenches and you're, I guess, logistic mates, as opposed to still really connected and sensual partners. How do you maintain that? Like I did go to one therapist who said to me it was my responsibility to nurture my sensual self outside of the relationship. It's not his responsibility to keep that alive for me. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, there is some truth in that. For me, though, this kind of speaks to, again, like the holistic nature of sex and desire. When we're not feeling excited by life, I think it's harder to feel really excited in the bedroom. If we don't have fun and playfulness with a partner outside of the bedroom, it's going to be really hard to translate that into, the fun, playful kind of sexy that we had back at the beginning. There is something about often couples going away and getting outside of their regular environment that suddenly rekindles that spark that they used to have. And I know that that's not necessarily practical on a regular basis, but I think often what that shows us is that actually still is there But there is something when we're home with the obligations and the tired and, and life is just freaking weighing us down, really, that is going to dampen that desire. And so I guess I partly agree with what the therapist said of, yeah, okay, you finding your sensuality and connecting with that. And I would say, you connecting with your pleasure in life is also your responsibility. And as women, we so often don't do that. We're like, I don't have time for pleasure. I've got all of these other things to go on with. But us finding our own pleasure and play and relaxation is so important there. And I don't love this language for a few reasons, but often you hear about, the divine feminine, and when someone connected like with their feminine selves, then they, found their desire again. For me, that is really about where our nervous system is at and connecting to so many things that we've often had at the beginning of a relationship or when we were younger. Novelty and play, that sense of aliveness, pleasure and relaxation. And again, they're often things that we don't give ourselves permission to have as women. So that is part of it. But I would also say that this is something that falls within the responsibility of the relationship as well, because what are you both doing to cultivate that? What are you both doing to cultivate romance? What are you both doing to prioritize intimacy? And maybe it needs a little bit longer to warm up than it did. Maybe there need to be other things in the relationship as well. Are you both managing the mental load? Are you both doing all of these things that makes a difference? So I never think it's an either. I never think it's an either or.
You mentioned a couple of times there, the way it was in the beginning, back when, and we know, those, the beginning of relationships when you have those sleepless nights and UTIs and the beard rash and, is it possible to get back to that? And I kind of think this in any aspect of life is you can't actually get back to anything because we can't go back. We can only go forward to whatever is next. But I really do miss that and yearn for that, butterflies and excitement, as opposed to, in a long-term relationship, you might feel like you've pretty much tried everything, done everything. You sort of get set into a bit of a routine of, what works and maybe sort of stick to that. And then it loses that spontaneity and fun and discovery.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually spoke on Sunrise about this week. They were doing a segment on the honeymoon period and having me talk through the different stages of love and relationships. And look, I agree with you. I don't think we can go back. And even though it's a nice feeling, I don't necessarily know that we want to or that it's better. So much of what happens in the honeymoon period, or what we call limerence, and this lasts anywhere from 6 months to 2.5 years, is about what is happening in our brain chemistry, in our reward system. We actually have a decrease in serotonin that leads to us constantly kind of thinking about this person. We're getting dopamine hits from them. There's a whole lot that goes on with hormones and neurotransmitters that lead to all of these feelings and an increase in desire that we associate with feeling in love. And that is going to naturally kind of fade and transition over the years. And that isn't a bad thing, because love and our relationships will, if they're the right ones and if we, cultivate them, will kind of transition into relationships where there is greater trust and comfort, and where there's also commitment and really, really knowing each other on a deeper level. It's really a deeper form of intimacy and sometimes, more satisfying as well. That being said, we do know that many couples manage to keep intimacy and desire alive in a different form. And they do that by doing, a whole lot of things that really prioritize the relationship and prioritize sex. Great relationships don't happen by accident. They really do take effort and intention and knowing exactly what to do. And so often I think we just expect relationships, oh my God, we found the right one and everything is amazing right now. And then we're like, great, that's done. I found the right person.
Yeah. Now I can hit cruise control, right?
Yeah, because we hear happily ever after, but we never hear what it actually takes to create happily ever after. And I explain this, and I often explain it to men as being like a car. Like, it doesn't matter how much you love your car or how great your car is. If you don't keep taking care of it, if you don't put fuel into it, if you don't check it out when a warning light comes on, if you don't take it to a professional every now and then to get it checked out, your car is not going to keep running well. And I think we can think of our relationships in the same way. They require constant fuel. They require, constant maintenance if we want them to be the very best that they can be. So by doing, by really kind of taking actions and making an effort, we see that couples actually do keep intimacy and desire alive, although it might be changed from, that what is actually a natural high of the honeymoon period.
I guess you've probably been asked this on the morning show because this is a really pedestrian question, but I know a lot of people will be curious about it.
Is it frequency?
How much sex should we be having? Yeah, absolutely. I've got a fair idea of what the answer is. And it's about quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
Like, how does it feel when you're actually doing it? Because like sometimes it might be weeks when you don't have time or whatever. But I do think that it is something that plays on people's minds.
Oh, I'm so glad you're not asking me this in a couples therapy session, because this is like the cause of many disagreements. So look, what we know is that the average frequency for sex is about once a week. Bit more when you're younger, bit less when you're older, and obviously it's going to change throughout your life if there are different things going on. We know that the benefits for sex tend to also peak at about once per week. So the benefits to the relationship, to desire, to helping people connect, and also all of the health benefits. More sex isn't necessarily better. There's a point where those benefits kind of cap out, and it's about once a week. But absolutely always two caveats here. One, you've already touched on. There's no point in having quantity if you're not having quality. And also it's really about both people in that relationship working out what feels good for them and being able to talk through it and navigate any, different desire levels that they have around that.
Because I know that like changing libidos or mismatched libidos is a really big issue in relationships, and that would only get more prevalent throughout menopause. Menopause?
It can. And I want to jump in here because I think there's a really prevailing myth that men will always have a higher sexual desire than women, and that increases later in life. And we don't. In heterosexual relationships, some men can have a higher desire. And also, as men age, their function doesn't work in the same way as well. And so it's actually, sex usually ends in a relationship because a man is finding it too difficult and doesn't want to address the function challenges. Now I'm seeing the look on your face, and I'm wondering if I've just like jumped in way too soon.
You totally just like segued exactly where I was going. So it is often considered at this time of life a her conversation and a her problem because her libido is waning or her desire is changing or her physical needs changing. However, menopause is a thing. So let's talk about the change in hormones for men, what happens when testosterone begins to wane, and how that then comes into play also with menopause.
Yeah. Something that I think I really want to speak to and I want to highlight because it always sits really uncomfortably with me. We often see desire as a women's problem. She just had a baby and she just lost her desire. What's wrong with her? Oh, she needs to go and fix it because, I still want sex as much as we did at the beginning. Okay, but now she's cleaning the house and taking care of the children and taking care of you. I always feel this tension and this moral dilemma when women show up and say, no, this is a me problem. Can you just help me fix it? And, my partner agrees it's definitely me. I'm like, oh, no, this is a together problem and we need to work on it together. And it's the same issue that I see in menopause now. Menopause has changed everything. And this is why I said what I said at the start. Oh, everything was great. And then now menopause and we're fighting. And it just feels like another way that we're blaming women and giving them more labor of now you're responsible for this as well. So I was women, it's not your fault. And there's probably a whole lot of other things going on that are contributing to this as well. In terms of how things change for men at this stage of life, look, things are going to change for both of us. And yes, we know that things are going to change biologically. Things are going to change around their identity as well. How they identify as a man, their role in the world, how they're showing up in relationships. And again, if they've been with a woman who's been so accommodating for so long, and all of a sudden she isn't, also at a point where they're starting to doubt themselves, there's a big kind of change around this. So yes, men can experience a change in desire as well. Some men do, some men don't, just like some women do and some women don't. We also know that physically, so at 50, men have a 50% chance of experiencing erectile dysfunction. At 60, it is 60%, 70%, 80%.
Wait, just for 1 second, clarify what erectile dysfunction looks like. Because sometimes people think it is just cannot get a boner, but it's way more than that.
Yeah, so struggle to get an erection despite the presence of enjoyable, sexual touch and wanting to, or getting an erection and losing it quite quickly as well, or not being able to maintain the erection for penetration, for example.
What about loss of control for orgasm? Does that come under the ED banner?
Do you mean we might call that
trigger happy? We call it trigger happy. Colloquially, that's what it's called.
We also, and look, and these often are so interlinked. Premature ejaculation, we would call it, or also delayed ejaculation, which is where men can't actually orgasm when they want to. And often they're all kind of really connected in here, and one can kind of lead to the other, for example. So yes, that can happen because sensation will change for both of us. For both men and women, what we need to orgasm, might change as we age. It can get harder to reach climax because blood flow is different. The tissues are different. So for men, it's often the loss of erections that is the biggest kind of challenge and concern. And there are obviously kind of medical things available for that. They don't always work. They often work best when a couple is working as a team on them, and they're also adjusting some of their behaviors and communication around this. Yeah, but very often it will be men in the relationship who just feel too ashamed to address it, and they stop engaging in sex because they don't want to feel embarrassed about the loss of function.
Which then creates this really big chasm. We've got not just this thing that's going on, but it becomes this the elephant in the room, the unspoken, this shame, this thing that I think the longer this stuff goes addressed, the easier it is for relationships to like really struggle.
Yeah, it's true. It often gets harder, and people often leave it thinking, oh, it's just a phase or it will get better again. But often the longer we leave it, the harder it becomes, and the challenges that made it hard to begin with don't get resolved. So there really is there is something so powerful about seeking support around this, or even just doing your own research and taking some actions to address this, because even through later life, this can be such a beautiful and important and wonderful part of a relationship and part of our lives as well.
Client you've worked with, or the oldest person that you have known that has a satisfying, let's not say thriving, crazy swinging from the chandeliers, but a satisfying sex life?
Okay, so I love that you asked this, because there was a fantastic woman who goes to one of the women's business networking events that I go to. I want to say a huge shout out to Adele here. So Adele is in her 70s, and last time we caught up, she was telling me about her new 50-year-old lover. But one of the problems was he couldn't keep up with her. And I mean, this is a woman who is like, she's such an absolute powerhouse. She continues to enjoy this part of her life. I had a mentor that was in her 80s and had a lover in his 20s. I think Cindy Gallop, who is the founder of Make Love Not Porn, gave a brilliant TED Talk on how she, as an older woman, liked to have sex with younger men, and that led her to start Make Love Not Porn, that gave kind of real sex education and real pornography, because she was dissatisfied with these younger lovers that were showing up. In terms of my practice, I think I have had couples in their 70s, 60s is really, really common. Really, really common. I had a fantastic couple who were like, you know what, like everything is pretty great, but this is like a second relationship for both of us, and we just want to make sure we're doing everything. Like, what are the secrets about really great sex that you can teach us? And I started to guide them through an exercise in the session, and it's normally an exercise where couples are like touching each other with their hands on each other's hands. And I remember this woman took her partner's hand and just started sucking on each one of his fingers in the session. And I was like, you guys don't need my help at all. Like, you're like, you can go off, you do your thing. You've got it going on. And certainly couples, many, many, many couples in their 50s and 60s who might have started a new relationship or might have been in the same relationship and are like, you know what? We have never had a great sex life, and we feel like if we don't address it now, it's done. And actually, we don't want that to be the case. We actually want to set ourselves up for continuing to enjoy this, and perhaps enjoying it in ways we never have in our later years.
So anyone who's listening who feels like, maybe they're past the prime of their sex lives, just take some comfort from knowing that, you don't necessarily need a much younger lover, but there is still a lot of sensuality to be had
Yeah.
if you desire it. And I have had another person who reached out who has zero desire for her husband, has lost respect for him in lots of different ways over time, doesn't want to leave, but also doesn't miss this part of their lives at all. She says she has no desire whatsoever. However, she feels like he's kind of missing out, and she has said that he can step out if he wants, but he refuses that. He wants to stay really loyal. And it's just something that could very easily just be left dormant.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Look, if, again, without knowing more about what's going on in her relationship, look, here's what I'll say is that often when couples show up, one partner is saying to me, I don't care if I never have sex again.
Yes.
And that's for various reasons. That feeling or that belief doesn't always last when we work through some of the, reconnecting, helping them communicate, really helping them both understand each other's perspective around this, and also giving them some tools to help them enjoy sex again. I have seen many, many, many women in particular who have said, it's just done for me. And through actually having more conversations with their partner, they've opened up to, there are ways that we can enjoy ourselves physically, intimately, even sexually. But it is about finding what works for each couple. And so it feels kind of tricky for me to give advice without having them both in front of me and talking them through it.
I think just even generally, I have heard a number of women say, like, I feel like sex is done for me, and if I never had it again, that would be okay. If somebody is single and feels that way, do you personally feel that is a protective mechanism, or do you feel like maybe it's okay that they're sick? Like, what do you think? Like, do you feel like this is a really important part of us as individuals, whether you're partnered or not? What do you think?
Look, again, this is so dependent, because I think sometimes it can be, and sometimes, people just have different priorities. There's certainly a kind of use it or lose it thing around sex that if we haven't had it, haven't engaged in it for a while, it's really easy for that to kind of fall off the radar. Also, again, when we get into a new relationship and we start, we enter that honeymoon period, there's going to be things that happen chemically and biological in our brains that actually can increase that desire. So there is a possibility for it. And also just in general, I want to speak to so many women who, partnered or not, in later life are like, you know what, this is actually the best it ever has been. And I'm going out and dating again, or loving also the new trend of male companions for women, because so often women are getting to a point where they're like, oh, I finally feel like this can be about me now. I'm no longer afraid to say what I like. I'm no longer afraid of pregnancy. I've given up caring. I'm just at that point where now sex can be something for me. And so this is a possibility that is also there. And it's not for me to, tell people, here's what you should do around sex. Whether it's an individual or a couple, I always want to show what the possibilities are, but work with them to find what is really right for them. and to work through any parts of, you know, their kind of decisions that might not be working for them or that might be causing some kind of friction.
Let's speak to atrophy for a moment, because I know that this can take people by surprise. It was something that I didn't know about until somebody I work with told me about it. And that is, again, that use it or lose it. What can happen if you don't use it? And then how can you get it back?
Yeah. Okay. So again, I want to say always speak to your gynecologist about this, because they can really, really work on the physical things, and we often work kind of in tandem with that. But again, the more that and there's so many, I want to say this, so there's so many benefits to when we're having sex, whether it's with a partner or using a vibrator or a toy, we're increasing blood flow to that area. You know, we are, you know, it often is helping with lubrication. And so if we are continuing to do this, we tend to get better results than if we just stop and the skin becomes more thin. It's just going to kind of fall off the radar a little bit, and then it gets harder and harder to start again.
Just letting everyone know it doesn't fall off. It's okay. Remember what your mum used to say, like certainly to my brother, if he's touch it, it'll fall off. Sorry, back up. The idea of sex can fall off the radar is what she was saying.
It can, that's right. Yes.
Yes.
I think that's it. I think that's my whole answer now.
Yeah, I know that sometimes what also happens is the vaginal canal can shorten, and it becomes harder if you do want to get back on the proverbial horse. You may need to see a pelvic floor physio and get some help there.
Yeah, you might need to. And again, I think this is why it's really important to speak to your gynecologist about where is the pain happening and exactly what it feels like and when, so that they can recommend whichever kind of physical treatments that might need to happen. There are things that we can do, like even changing the positions. And I think this is something that that we see often in later life. Anyway, you know, the joints, the old knees don't necessarily, you know, hold up the way they used to.
Reverse cowgirl is dead to me.
Right? The flexibility can change. And so there is also, you know, kind of working out together, you know, also like, you know, maybe your partner's carrying just a little bit of extra weight as well. It's not so easy to have them on top anymore. There are a whole lot of things that we might need to look at changing depending on someone's individual circumstance. You know, we might need to introduce, you know, a special chair to the bedroom, or just get some really good cushions. You know, look at, you know, what other toys we might include in the bedroom that might help both of you. There's a whole lot of ways that sex might change, but a whole lot of things that we can do to actually make sure it stays, you know, as enjoyable as possible. And so we want to, you know, we want to kind of address this based on what specifically is happening for the couple or the woman in front of us.
I mean, realistically, what I'm hearing here, Isiah, is it's all about communication, and it's all about ongoing attention, like mindful action and you know, putting attention on this area of your life, and not just letting it sort of fall by the wayside or fall off, not just letting it fall off. And that, you know, that can feel like another responsibility at this stage of life where everything seems to be getting kind of pointy.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, relationships are a responsibility. Again, like if we want them to thrive, they take effort and intention. And yeah, it's absolutely hard in this culture that wants to separate us and make life hard and just have us be really kind of contributing to this productivity machine. But actually, cultivating our relationships is one of the best things that we can do for our health and well-being, and it can be enormously supportive as we go through changes in life. So yeah, our relationships and our sex life do take some effort and intention, but also the rewards can be really, really incredible. They're one of the most beneficial things in our lives.
Reading between the lines, I'm pretty sure you just prescribed everyone taking half a day off work a week in order to have a sex afternoon. Is that what I just heard?
Sure, I support that. There was actually a politician somewhere, of course, in Scandinavia that actually suggested this at one point. So yes, we should. I mean, I think we should be taking a day off. I wish that we didn't live in a society that made it so hard to prioritize and connect in so many of our relationships.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I agree. Any final thoughts for anyone who is in this stage of life and, really questioning their sexuality or whether it is done, or any final thoughts there?
Look, sexuality will continue to change throughout our lives. And we do know that couples and individuals can continue to experience really satisfying intimacy and physical touch and affection right throughout their lives, well into their 80s and 90s. It does take learning the skills, getting the information, and making this a priority, but it absolutely is possible.
Isiah, thank you so much for coming on, and I'd love to have you on again. Let's do some more
Yes,
swinging from the
amazing.
chandeliers conversations, and really dive into all things juicy, sexy love.
I love it. Thank you so much. Always great to talk to you.
See you soon.
It's so good to be able to talk about sex and menopause and all of this stuff without clinical distance or shame, right? There's often so much shame attached to it. And I really also appreciated that Isiah did not let this stay a woman's problem, right? Let it just be something that we have to deal with on our own. So there are two things I really want you to think about from this episode. If you've been carrying this like it is yours only to fix, right? Whether it is low desire, whether it's pain, whether it is guilt about things not being the way that they used to be, I invite you to ask if there is other stuff going on in your relationship as a whole and not just your hormones. Isiah was really clear that menopause really creates problems out of nowhere, and it often just brings to the surface stuff that is already there. Sometimes it's been there for decades. So before you take the full responsibility that this is a you thing, maybe just some honest reflection with yourself and your partner might help you to be able to begin to work through some of the stuff. The second thing that I invite you to think about is this. We often spend so much time thinking about or mourning these sensual selves or these versions of ourselves from before, right? And we are sad that we are not like we were in the beginning. But I don't think that that's coming back, right? Not because it's gone forever, but because we can't go backwards in time to something that was, but only forward into whatever this next version looks like. So that's not automatically a loss. Perhaps we can move forward into something even richer, deeper, and more beautiful, more intimate than previously. Some of the most connected relationships Isiah sees are the ones who stopped chasing the honeymoon phase and built something with more trust and more communication and honestly, less performance. And also, in the beginning, all of those butterflies and stuff are about a lot of uncertainty. We don't know if this thing is actually going to be a thing. So now we have certainty and stability, and we can build something deeper and wonderful in this next chapter. If this episode stirred up something for you or for your relationship, don't just process it with your girlfriends over the wine. have the hard conversations, because you never know what rich, beautiful intimacy it might lead to. I'll see you next time.
I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode of Big Stuff as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, it would really help me if you wanted to share it with just one person that you think is going to get something out of it. And also feel free to drop a comment. All of these things really help podcasts to gain more ears, and that's what we're really here for. Also, be sure to subscribe, then you will never miss an episode. If you want to find out more about me, who I am, what I do, then you can go and check me out at daniellecolley.com.au. I'll see you next episode for more Big Stuff. 1,